In this video, we'll be showing the technique used to produce these segmented tapered staves. I'm John Manier from Accu-Slice. In a previous video, I produced these 18 segmented stave projects using my Accu-Slice system with my new rotating carriage. These projects all had straight staves. Now, they're the same distance and width from top to bottom. But instead of making this tall, which is tapered, I wanted to use some tapered staves. So in this video, I'm going to be attempting to produce some staves that are tapered from top to bottom. So this will be a stave that will be wider at the top than it is at the bottom. That'll produce a tapered vase in this case. So I have some staves here, they're going to be about 12 inches long. And I set up my rotating carriage a little bit differently. I first of all set the angle. I use my level once again to set my angle on my blade, zero my blade, and set my carriage to 20 degrees on both ends. But then I also created some spacers here. I got a spacer here on this far left end, which is 0.4 inches thick, and going down to 0 on this side. So my entire table here is tilted, a few degrees. So once again, I use my digital protractor to adjust my blade. So first of all, I put this against my bandsaw blade, against the back edge, behind the teeth of the blade, and it's not measuring quite 90 degrees, so let me zero that out. So I zeroed out to 0 degrees. Then I put it on my carriage, my Accu-Slice rotating carriage, and I adjusted this to 20 degrees. It's off a hair, so let me adjust that a hair. So that's at 20 degrees, and likewise I adjust the opposite side also. So both sides are adjusted to 20 degrees. Now next thing I need to do, I need to tilt my sacrificial fence here. So I did here, I put some spacers on my carriage, between my carriage plate and the sacrificial fence. And I'm going to where the plate is flat against the sacrificial plate is flat against the aluminum plate on this edge. And this edge I have a gap of 0.400 inches. And I just put some spacers in the center to give it some additional support. And I use some longer screws here because they're going a longer distance. But they got it all clamped in place so it's nice and sturdy, and I have a nice taper here. And this taper should give me a variation between, I'd say, 1.25 inches and 1.5 inches diameter between the top and bottom of my vase that I'm planning on making with this project. So to do my test run, I'm just using some MDF boards. I cut some MDF boards which are about 1 inch wide, 3/4 inch thick, and about 12 inches long. And I'll be mounting this on my sacrificial fence. And I did put a pin in the back here because I want these staves to be exactly the same length because they're going to be tapered. And I want all my tapers to be exactly the same distance, top and bottom. So that's why I put this spacer or stop at the bottom. And I'm using 2 of my tapered offset cam to hold the board in place. And the way I set this up is, I have these a little bit loose, just maybe a 1/4 turn loose from being tight. Put my board flat against, and tighten off my offset cam, and then tighten my screws, and that pulls my board tight against the sacrificial fence. And that's tight both sides and against my stop in the back. And I adjust my initial width at the top of about 0.8 inches, which should give me a top diameter about 4.5 inches in diameter. And the bottom, of course, will be smaller, probably more like 2 3/4 inches in diameter. So let me go and lower my blade guides a little bit. And we're ready to do our first cut. What I'm showing here is cutting at the actual cutting speed. I tend to cut quite slowly because the slower you cut, the smoother it cuts, the less sanding you need to do. In subsequent shots in this video, I'll be showing the cutting at 5 times the actual cutting speed, again for viewing purposes. So to remove this from the sacrificial fence. So now I have my stave going from a diameter of 0.88 at the top, which should give me a disc of about almost 5 inches in diameter. Go to a diameter of, I got 0.60 at the bottom, which should be about 3 inches in diameter. So that should be my tapered stave. So let me just go and make 18 more of these, and then we'll piece them together and see how they look. All subsequent cuts are being shown at 5 times the actual cutting speed, again for viewing purposes. And so I cut a total of 18 of these segmented tapered staves. I previously had the camera at the back side of the bandsaw blade for showing the cutting operation, so I moved the camera to the opposite side, or the front side, of the bandsaw blade so you can see the actual cutting from the front position. You can see a little more detail in putting it in this position. Okay, here's my 18 tapered staves. They're 12 inches long. And let me try and put these together and see how they match up. I think the best way to lay these out is to put a piece of masking tape dummy side up to kind of temporarily hold them in position. And that looks pretty good. Reasonably close match on the joints, both top and bottom. And tapered. So we got 5 inches at the top and 3.5 at the bottom. So 1.5 inches of taper. So now I'm set to cut some good wood. I always use MDF as a test piece on these because if the angle's off a little bit I can readjust it, but these are pretty close. I have my boards all cut. I have yellow heart and tiger wood. And I cut these boards square. They're about 0.89 inches square. And I cut these all straight and parallel. I ran all sides through my board sander, both the sides and the edges. So everything's nice and perfect and straight, so these should all line up quite nicely when they're glued together. So let's now start cutting these on the Accu-Slice system. So these boards are all 10 inches long and they're 0.88 inches square. So mount these on the carriage. After each of these tapered staves was cut, I did use some 220 grit sandpaper to sand off the fuzzies on the edges of each of the boards. So again, using the same procedure, I cut the remaining 8 yellow heart tapered staves. So again, I moved the camera to the opposite side of the bandsaw blade so you can see the cutting from the opposite direction. After I did cut each of the boards, I did take a brush and cleaned off the sawdust from the sacrificial fence and the cleat at the bottom of the fence. Again, I don't want any dust interfering with the positioning of the boards when they're attached to the sacrificial fence. Once again, using the same procedures, I cut the 9 tigerwood tapered staves. Well, there's my 18 boards alternating yellow heart and tigerwood. And so let me glue these up like I did the previous ones, or at least put them together. I'll do the actual glue up tomorrow. And I will be using epoxy to glue these up. Here's my tapered segmented staves ready for glue up. I just finished cutting these tapered staves for this vase I'm making, and in this project I went from a diameter of 3.5 inches at the base to 5 inches at the top, so it's a total variation of 1.5 inches from the bottom to the top. But I want to make another project and increase the angle a bit larger. So what I did is I increased my spacing on my sacrificial fence. In the previous project this gap was around 0.4 inches. I increased it to about 0.65, almost 0.7 inch gap, so it's quite a bit larger. This should give me a variation between the top and bottom of a vase of about at least 2 inches, so it should be a little bit larger taper on the vase. So I have everything set up. I put new spacers in here, I readjusted, I put some longer screws in here to reach the gap, and I readjusted my angle, make sure everything was still at 20 degrees, and so now we're ready to start cutting some of these pieces to make this tapered project. So for this project I'll be using purple heart and yellow heart, and the main board is a little bit wider. These are 1.25 inches wide by 3/4 inch thick, so give me a larger taper on these staves. Cutting some up. Again, using the same procedures I used in the past. Loosening up these set screws a little bit. Pushing my board against my pin at the bottom. Tightening up my offset cams. And then tightening up the screw to pull it tight against the sacrificial fence. This procedure was fully described in my video on the tapered screw style offset cam clamps. I pull the board tight against the sacrificial fence, and I'm cutting from about there, that's 1.1 inch at the top, which should give me a diameter of about 6.25 inches in diameter at the top, and again quite a bit smaller at the bottom. So I'm going to go start cutting some of these and we'll see what we get. So the first thing I do is lower my blade guys. I raised them to adjust the angles to measure it, but now I want to get them as low as I can. Again, not only for safety, but a little more accuracy. I got a diameter or width up here of 1.1 inches. That should give me a diameter around 6.5 inches. And at the bottom I have a length of 0.73, which should give me a diameter around 4 and 4.25 inches. So I got a variation of about 2 inches from the top to the bottom on this. So let me finish cutting the pieces. Now the scrap I cut off, I can make another segmented bowl, and this will have a diameter at the top of 0.82, which is about 4.6 inches, and at the base, diameter or length of 0.47. Yeah, length of 0.47 should give me a diameter of less than 3 inches. So I'll have I'll be able to make 2 tapered stave bowls out of these boards. Okay, here's my completed tapered staves, and from those boards I cut two separate sets. One will be wider than the other, as you can see here, difference in diameters. So let me go ahead and tape these up like I did before, and we'll see how they look when they're all taped up. And I have a little over 6 inches on the top and 4 inches on the bottom. So I have a taper of 2 inches. So there's the one set up, and I'm going to do the other one. So next one I have a diameter at the top of like 4 3/4, and that's 2.5. So again, a taper of over an inch on each side. So there we go. There's our two plus the one I made previously. So we have 3 of these ready for glue up. This concludes part 1 of this video series on producing these segmented tapered staves. These were made on our Accu-Slice system using a new rotating carriage which I recently developed. And I took that rotating carriage and I tilted the sacrificial fence a few degrees to create my tapered staves. And that technique worked out quite nicely to develop these tapered staves. I am splitting this up into at least one additional video. The gluing up of these is going to be a little bit of a challenge. As you can see, there's a lot of movement in these. And I need to get these nice and straight as I'm gluing them up. So that'll be a little bit of a challenge. So I need to make some sort of jig or alignment jig to get these straight in all directions. So that'll be a little bit of a challenge, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it yet, but I'll be working on it in the next week. So in the next video I'll be gluing these up. I will be using epoxy because I need a lot of time to get these properly aligned. And then I'll be putting some bases on these and some maybe a top ring with some multiple layers to accent the piece a little bit more. So that'll all be shown in the next video. In previous video I made the straight staves, and I had to make these a lot thicker because I couldn't, they weren't tapered. But I made a lot of projects from those straight staves, including these various vases and bowls, using different techniques which were shown in previous videos. Once again, thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, as always, please give us a call or drop us an email. We're always looking for new ideas and ways to improve the system and develop new techniques. In fact, the technique for developing the staves came from one of our customers. And I took that comment from the customer. I developed the rotating carriage and I was able to produce these straight staves. And in those straight staves I made a bunch of nice projects, including these various vases and bowls using that technique. But I wanted to develop staves that were tapered, so I didn't have to use so much thick wood to make these tapers. So by using this technique with the tapered staves, I got some nice staves using less wood.